and started breeding in large numbers. Then areas where sick person has been, there is need for us to decontaminate that area for us to reduce further spread of this disease. And at the community level, there is need for us to disseminate accurate information about Lassa fever prevention and control. Next slide. So, what are the environmental sanitation interventions? So, I will be taking you through various environmental interventions that was handled by the Federal Ministry of Environment in order to break a chain of transmission. So, the ministry have established a sanitation desk officer across the states of the Federation. This helps us to have a seamless flow of information from federal to the subnational. So we have also implemented the deratization activity in high-burden communities who are recording Lassa fever confirmed cases. The ministry have also donated the sanitary waste bin, that is a waste management tools, bags to LGS to help them in breaking the chain of transmission of Lassa fever. So the ministry have also trained environmental health officers in hotspot community on advanced method of bait preparation and application. We have also conducted a community sensitization and awareness campaign on Lassa fever, emphasizing on the importance of environmental sanitation and control measures. The minister have also developed rodent control SOPs that guides environmental health officers in the field to carry out the seamless rodent control activities in hotspot communities. We have also established the Integrated National Environmental Health Surveillance System, INES. Is a digital system which we use to track the abundance of these rodents in our community, the area where there are heavy infestation of these rodents in our community. We have also carried out a mapping of hotspots community through community engagement, focus group discussion, and community listening. This helps us to have a target intervention through community participation. They guide us to show us areas where these rodents are causing havoc, and we're able to carry out our intervention successfully. And we have also contributed to the development of 5 years National Lassa Fever Strategic Plan. And we also participated in various Lassa Fever Action Review meeting, where we have shared our lessons learned in the field and also documented lessons for future interventions. Next slide. So this is map of Nigeria showing states where deratization activities were implemented by Federal Ministry of Environment from 2019 to 2024. So the states colored in green are where the ministry have intervened in communities that have recorded Lassa fever confirmed cases. So we have intervened in states, Bauchi State, Benue, Ebonyi State, Edo, Kaduna, Kogi, and Ondo State. So we have intervened in at least one community to 2024. So the states colored in green have recorded a confirmed Lassa fever cases. Have intervened in communities that have recorded. So this is a picture showing confirmed cases. Ministry donating sanitary waste bin, waste bag, and rodent control equipment to LGA to help them carry out their duty effectively in breaking the chain of transmission of this virus, because we believe that is a sanitation preventable disease, and this is if our environment is sanitized, we can break the chain of transmission. Ministry donating sanitary waste bin, waste bag. So these are the results of our deratization activities in the community. And worthy of note here is these rats are being harvested from people's homes, not from bush. So it shows that we are having direct interaction with these rodents. That's like the sanitation preventable. And also, this Amastonis rat that was isolated from people's homes. So we can see that on daily basis, people are interacting with these rodents in their homes. Next slide. So we want to acknowledge Nigeria Center for Disease Control and Prevention, WHO, State Ministry of Environment, Food and Agriculture Organization for helping us carry out this intervention seamlessly in the state. I thank you all for listening. Over.
Well, thank you so much, Sanitarian Collins, okay, for this presentation on environmental factors driving Lassa fever transmission. Thank you for highlighting what the ministry has done so far in preventing the spread of these sanitation preventable diseases in our society. I'm sure our colleagues who have joined this call have one or two concerns. Please, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat box or until when we get to the question and answer segment where we can take as much questions as we can. Thank you so much. I will move to the next presenter who will take us through nature displaced, the impact of habitat destruction and climate change on Lassa fever transmission. Permit me the singular honor to introduce Professor Godson Anna, a lecturer who is a professor in the Department of
Hello, good morning all. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Environmental Health Sciences, Park of Ibadan, Nigeria. Please.
Okay, so I think our anchor, the moderators network is a bit affected. So perhaps, Prof, you could just take the stage. Thank you, and over, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Yetunde. Happy New Year to everyone. It's my pleasure to be part of this very important gathering. Even though I've been pulled out of my annual leave, I really had to. This is the first official assignment that I'm carrying out for the year. I'm still on leave. So next slide, please. I'll take us through the following menu subsections, the preamble, introduction, and the influence of environmental degradation and climate change on Lassa fever vector ecology, impact on the Lassa fever transmission and prevalence, and then I'll conclude. So next slide, please. So I'll take us through the Lassa fever, the following vector, menu subsections, rodent. Where is their hideout? What exposes them? How do they survive? When do they propagate? And who are those affected? These are a number of questions that oftentimes as scientists, as practitioners, even community persons, we seem to be grappling with. And so in the course of this presentation, some of these expositions will be made. Next slide. The natal multi-mammal mouse, Mastomys natalensis, is the host of Lassa arenavirus, causing Lassa hemorrhagic fever in West Africa, especially in Nigeria, where it is highly endemic. Between 2018 and upwards of 2020 till date, Nigeria recorded its highest annual incidences of Lassa fever. And the various absolute figures confirms these cases across the different time scales for 29 states. This has prompted national and international healthcare mobilization and raises concerns about ongoing and systematic emergence of Lassa fever nationally. In sub-Saharan Africa, agricultural intensification, urbanization, and other anthropogenic activities, which my previous speaker has extensively dwelt on, have increased the risk of proliferation of the rodents in both rural and urban habitats. Next slide. Next slide, please. So we have an illustration of the spatial analysis of spatiotemporal trends in Lassa fever surveillance, confirmed cases, and diagnostic laboratory capacity across Nigeria. And it shows, based on the natural log scale and total reported Lassa fever cases, suspected versus confirmed, and so on, between the time period 2012 up to 2019. Like I said, there are also projections in the last 5 years. Next slide. Again, we also have the spatial distribution and correlates of annual Lassa fever occurrence and incidence between the time period at the local government authority level across the country. The map shows fitted probability of Lassa fever occurrence, with A showing the incidence cases per 100,000 persons, visualized on the natural log scale. These are all models that have been used to prepare for the spatial spread, as well as the temporality of the occurrence across the country. Next slide. Now, I had modified the topic to bring in the aspect of ecosystems. And it would be nice to explain what ecosystems are and what happens to ecosystems when they're degraded. An ecosystem is a community of living organisms and their physical environment that interacts with each other. Ecosystems can be natural or artificial and can be found in land or in water. And of course, in recent studies, we also have atmospheric ecosystems. What is ecosystem degradation? An ecosystem degradation is a process by which human activities and natural processes damage the health of the ecosystems. And of course, our interest is that when the ecosystem is degraded, it leads to a decline in the services and the health of ecosystems. Next slide. What are the natural and anthropogenic ecosystem degraders? We have flood, forest fires, volcanic eruption, hurricanes, tsunami, and landslides. Among those natural ecosystem degraders, of course, this list is not exhaustive. And amongst the anthropogenic ecosystem degraders, we have road construction, bridge construction, and other forms of urbanization, and then farmland preparation, deforestation, and industrial layout. You can see the two highlighted areas, both for the natural and anthropogenic, showing the importance of those activities to the subject of discussion, which is the rodent ecology, the abundance, and the transmission of the Lassa fever. Next slide. It would be nice to discuss the implications of climate change based on the current happenings globally. And so, by way of reminding us, what is climate change? It refers to long-term shift in temperatures and other weather parameters. The shifts occurring naturally or anthropogenically, with the anthropogenic drivers being the dominant forcings and contributing factors to the climate change. The anthropogenic forcings or drivers or factors are largely from combustion of fossil fuels, deforestation, and other land use related activities, and emissions are released, and mostly greenhouse gases. And then currently, we're also looking at carbon in terms of the brown carbon and black carbon that are also contributing to global warming. And what are the evidences of climate change? The evidence for rapid climate change is as follows: rising global temperature, warmer oceans, shrinking ice sheets, declining ice sheets and glacier size, decreased snow cover, longer frost-free seasons, and acidic ocean surfaces, and drought conditions. Again, I've highlighted two of the very critical areas that are very important to our part of the global space that fits into the Lassa fever prevalence and the proliferation of its vector. Next slide. Again, I've highlighted two of the very critical areas that from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, there are evidences of climate change based on the models, increase in the greenhouse gases from the figure from the Phanerozoic carbon dioxide levels, as well as increase in the surface temperature, the solar activity proxies over the decadal time scale of more than 3 to 4 decades now. And these are pointers to the fact that the increase in temperature and other meteorological factors are drivers that can modulate the ecology of the rodents that harbor the virus Lassa fever. Next slide. Bringing it back or nearer home, we have in weather patterns across the country where there are late onsets of rainfall in terms of precipitation in different parts of the country, and then early cessation. Now, these changes and adverse conditions in climate pattern drives some of the observed changes in terms of the life pattern and activities of the vectors in their ecological domains. Next slide. So we'll be looking at the influence of environmental degradation on rodent ecology. Globally, land degradation directly impacts about 1.5 to 3.2 billion people. And it does this by affecting the water and nutrient cycles, reducing food and biomass. Land degradation is a big challenge that has an impact on ecosystem integrity. It diminishes long-term ecological productivity, native biological diversity, and resilience. Empirical evidence shows it influences vector abundance, including the small mammals, the marmots, natalensis, that we're really interested in terms of the propagation of Lassa fever. Next slide. Impact of deforestation on the multi-marmot rodent. Deforestation from various studies increases the abundance of rodents and their ectoparasites. Rodent abundance increased with forest loss from the statistical analysis showing a prevalence and relationship that is highly significant between the rodent abundance and the destruction of the forest. And from the previous speaker, as the forest ecology is being perturbed, it leads to the migration of the rodent inwards into the entire community. The ongoing loss of forest promotes the proliferation of zoonotic disease vectors in tropical ecosystems. This can potentially increase the frequency of affectation among the local population. Next slide. Now we'll be looking at impact of climate change on Lassa fever transmission. Studies by Clegg 2009 indicate that the main factors that can affect the burden of infectious diseases in humans are changes in abundance, virulence, or transmissibility of infectious agents. 2, an increase in probability of exposure of humans. And 3, an increase in the susceptibility of humans to infection and the consequences of the infection. In particular, alterations in the environment brought about by currently predicted climate changes clearly have the potential to affect, to a greater or lesser extent, all the 3 aforementioned factors. Next slide. In the first category, there are likely to be changes in the abundance of arenaviruses, in the sense that the reservoir host rodent populations are likely to be affected one way or another by changes in the climate. Thus, prolonged drought in a particular region may lead to a reduction in population size, whereas increased seasonal rain may lead to a population explosion. In West Africa, a recent detailed study of the distribution of Lassa fever outbreaks and cases in the periods between 1951 to 1989 revealed that areas of medium risk had an annual rainfall in the range of 1,200 to 1,500 millimeters. Next slide. This is an illustration of the spread of the arenavirus across the globe from NASA, from space imagery. And it shows that in the West African sub-region, we have some level of preponderance of the arenavirus, and which is also found in some parts of the Southern America. Next slide. The table shows retrospective and prospective predictive accuracy of climate-driven Lassa fever incidents. And we can see between what we have as the baseline and what is climate-driven, there are changes between 2012 and 2020 from what has been predicted to be the changes in the climate-related parameters and the preponderance of the Lassa fever virus and the vectors that are associated with it. Next slide. Whereas rainfall in the range of 1,500 to 3,000 millimeters was associated with a high risk of disease, regions with less than 1,200 millimeters or more than 3,000 millimeters of rainfall had no recorded occurrence of Lassa fever. Rainfall thus appears to be a major risk factor in the incidence of Lassa fever. And this is very important, especially in our country where we normally have sporadic floodplains from heavy torrents of rainfall. We can envisage the direct effects of climate on the size and behavior of virus-carrying rodent populations, as well as on the human populations themselves. Next slide. This is through changing land use, for example, irrigation, triggered by increasing temperatures, fluctuating weather conditions, and the resultant disturbance of local landscapes. Climate change is likely to lead to mass migration and the movements of the vector population. Some members of the arenavirus family are important causes of viral hemorrhagic fevers when humans become infected. And these include the Lassa and a number of other viruses that are found within the region that are also known to have caused disease in a few cases, including laboratory workers. And of course, that is also further elucidating the contagious nature of the virus. The arena viruses are principally viruses of rodents of the family Muridae. Each virus is associated primarily with a single rodent species, which is a reservoir species. Although in several cases, infected animals of another species have been detected from time to time. Next slide. So I'll conclude by saying that in recent times, the ecosystems have suffered several perturbations from largely anthropogenic activities. The combined effect of land degradation and climate impact has affected the vector ecology, its abundance, and species diversity. The prevalence and sporadic increase in transmission of Lassa fever can be traced to the palpable changes in the earth systems. The prevention and control of the propagation of this public health scourge must therefore employ integrated efforts, particularly the environmental health dimensions. Next slide. Thank you very much for your attention. Over.
Thank you so much, Professor Dotson Anna, for this insight into. I like the way you married climate change phenomenon, environmental degradation, to Lassa fever transmission. I'm sure a lot of our audience are having questions on their minds, and we can see your questions already popping up in the Q&A section. Please do well to post your questions there, and hopefully we are going to attend to them. So for want of time, I will go straight to our last presenter for today, who is going to take us through from knowledge to action, strengthening communication, research and policy for environmental control of Lassa fever. Permit me to introduce Dr. Edwin Usoto, who is a United Nations Global Environmental Health Specialist with the World Health Organization. Please, if you're on the call, it's your time for your presentation. Thank you.
Yes,
This is
I think
Dr.
you
Edwin.
have to reach out to him. I think he dropped off the call.
Okay, let's reach out to him.
Perhaps maybe while we are doing that, maybe we could begin to answer some of the questions, just to save time as well. I know some have been directed at Prof, some have been directed at Collins. So I don't know, maybe just a few minutes to see. And
all right, I will agree with you. So while we are trying to get Dr. Edwin to the call, we'll take one question. This one is directed to Santeria Collins. This from Rejoice Lukalawa. She said, knowing that those rats can also climb elevated surfaces, do you still advise that foodstuff like Gary can be spread on elevated surfaces? I don't know if you get the question, Santeria Collins.
Yes, I do.
Okay, please, can you make an attempt to answer?
Yeah, we do advise that spreading of foodstuffs, especially gari and grain, should be on elevated surface. So, yeah, we know that it can climb all these elevated surface. But what we advise is we use a slippery or smooth poles to support this elevated surface. So we know that rats cannot climb a slippery or a smooth surface. So if we use this as pole to support those elevated surface, there's no way rats can come in contact with the foodstuff. Or if you cannot use the elevated surface, we can also use alternative method of drying, which is indoor drying. Drying our food stuffs in a well-cleaned, ventilated room, which is free from these rodents. Thank you. I hope I have answered your questions. Thank you. I also saw another question in the chat box that was directed to me. It said to the first presenter, knowing that those in a situation where people cannot afford the sanitary bin, can another design or implementation be put in place? Yeah, if we cannot afford a sanitary waste bin, we advise to use a plastic bucket or old paint bucket with tight fitting cover. And also, you clearly label this container sanitary waste to avoid misusing this container. Thank you.
Right, thank you, sir, for your insight to this question. I'm sure you've provided a good answer. I'm trying to get through to add Dr. Edwin. I just realized
Professor's questions as well.
Okay, yeah, we will come to that. I just realized that Dr. Edwin he joined as a participant. So I don't know if we can.
We're sorting that out already. Just continue. Thank you.
All right. So I will take another question. This one is to Professor Anna. Somebody wants to get a clear meaning of the acronym IPCC models. Prof, if you're hearing me, can you just tell her the meaning? IPCC models.
Yeah, the full meaning of IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And the IPCC has produced different reports. We have the reports of the fourth year reports. So, but the full meaning is Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And in that, within the IPCC, there have been several models, several climate models based on different studies across the globe. Over.
Thank you so much, Prof, for that insight. I'm sure we've answered the question. I'd like to ask.
One moment. Our colleagues from eHealth Africa, please, I've sent you several messages. Please kindly respond. Hello? Okay, go on, please.
Okay, all right. Prof, there's still another question for you. If you can throw more light on the statement that the rainfall appears to be a major risk factor in the incidence of Lassa fever. Can you throw more light on that?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Two weather patterns here in Nigeria, the rainy season and the dry season. So across the two seasons, studies have shown the high prevalence of Lassa fever on the dry season compared to the rainy season. But as we continue to experience changes in the climatic pattern, high incidence of or high torrential rainfall and flooding affects the rodents and sometimes displaces them from their natural habitats, and they seem to migrate towards safer domains. So that's why we're talking about the rainy period also being a risk factor to the prevalence of the Lassa fever in some localities. Thank you.
Prof, are you still there? It's like we've missed you at some point.
Yes, I'm there. I was waiting for you to. Can you hear me now?
All right, Prof.
Yeah.
Thank you again for clarifying the two weather seasons and whether it is dry or a wet season. It's very important that people take matters into their hands to be able to reduce the interaction between these rodents, especially keeping our foodstuff away from where they will perch.
All right,
And
Mr.
okay,
Senga, sorry if I have to
yes,
cut you
yes,
short. Our colleagues in the
okay.
NCC comms, please, can you make Edwin Ede a panelist from the attendees, please? I don't know why he joined with that link or registered. I guess he missed the communication. I'm trying to reach out to colleagues from eHealth, Elijah and Co. I can't hear anybody.
Okay, so sorry about that. I've
Please, can you
I've made
reshare the link to him or make him a panelist, please?
yes, I've made him a panelist. He's joining again.
All right.
Okay, great. So I think we have Dr. Edwin now. All right, over.
Okay. Confirm you can hear me loud and clear.
Loud and clear.
All right. All right. Thank you so much. And I sincerely appreciate all your patience and sorry for the technical issue. All right. Thank you. Well done. And let me first of all applaud the effort of the NCDC as well as the Federal Ministry of Environment for this bold step in moving forward in 2025. I recall vividly that this was exactly the same period we are planning for the LIC, the Lassa Fever International Conference that was held in 2019. Once again, my name is Dr. Edwin Isotu Ede. I oversee Public Health and Environment Program, WHO Nigeria, and it's important privilege that I'll be speaking on them, looking at the knowledge to action, how to strengthen communication, research, and policy for environmental control of Lassa fever in Nigeria. Next slide. Yeah, permit me to sincerely applaud Collins and Professor Hannah for a very important work looking at the overview of the environmental factors, the vector ecology, land degradation, climate change, and the dynamics of factors that is driving Lassa fever transmission in Nigeria. But what is really concerned, and what I want us to focus on this presentation is to look at why are we still here, and what do we need to move forward from communication to policy and to shaping research agenda for Lassa fever in Nigeria. Let's start from where we are coming from. It behoves me to inform each and every one of us that once again, the first index case of Lassa was recorded in Nigeria. That was in 1969. I'm talking about 9 years after independence. And if you calculate it now, that is 56 years. So a man who was born, who is 66 years old, that man might have grown and begin to have grandchildren. And we are still battling with the same issue up to this moment. So it's a time for sober reflection to say, what do we need to do differently? And what are the key actions we need to take, okay, to address Lassa fever? A lot of explanation has been given on the arenavirus and also the vector of Lassa fever, which is Mastomys natalensis, and also the mode of transmission. But at this point, it's important for me to emphasize the fact that Lassa fever has been listed as a priority pathogen by the World Health Organization and a focus area for vaccine development. So the second issue is, where are we? with the vaccine development agenda, because it's a very key element for prevention of any diseases and for interrupting the chain of transmission of diseases, which is one of the key goal of this presentation. Confirm you can hear me. If you can hear me, just give a thumbs up. Let me confirm that you're hearing me. All right, so next slide. Yeah, the environment plays a very critical role in the transmission of Lassa, but also the entire dynamics of environment. And let me just give us an overview of the environmental epidemiological profile of Nigeria. As we speak, 29% of the burden of diseases in Nigeria is attributable to risk factors from the environment. So here we are not just talking about Lassa, drivers of Lassa alone. We are looking at from the issues of healthcare waste management, to climate change, to poor water and sanitation, to issue of chemical and many other issues. But the interesting insight, which was explained by Professor Hannah, is on the climate change. Most of you, November last year, were with us at the JAIR, the Joint Annual Review of the Health Sector, and that presented a very laudable opportunity for us to launch the Nigerian first ever climate health vulnerability assessment. And that report shows that over 21% of the burden of the disease, as we speak, will be attributable to climate change. So that is important because we have seen a lot of dynamics of spread of climate-sensitive diseases, and Lassa fever is one of the top climate-sensitive diseases, including cholera, malaria, and many other diseases. Yeah, we don't also have to lose sight of the fact that sanitation is a very important factor and determinant of health, especially in most communities. When sanitation and hygiene is compromised, okay, it triggers quick spread of many diseases because people may not be able to have access to basic water for hand washing and improve IPC, which is one important thing that we need to emphasize. And when we are talking about IPC, even though Nigeria has made tremendous in primary healthcare last year, but our studies during the WASH norm report shows that over 94% of the health facilities do not have a combined combination of water sanitation, effective wash services in the health facility. So what that means is that if you go to a typical facility, let's say in Ondo State, sometimes you may see that there is borehole, but the tap is not flowing. Okay. Some you may see that the water is running, but the water is contaminated. Okay. Some the water is working, but the toilet is not working. So these are real determinants that we need to start addressing the root cause of diseases in Nigeria. Next slide. So if you look at this is based on my my expert review of some of the critical environmental crisis or problem we have in Nigeria. And if you see on the number 4 on the 4 in no particular order is issue on wash and vector-borne outbreaks that needs to be addressed. So which of course include Lassa fever. And these raise two important propositions. The need for us to begin to look at address health problem from a more comprehensive One Health approach, and the need for the health sector to move into a sustainable health system, because the health system we're operating right now is not sustainable. A sustainable health system is that must think through all the value chain and ensure that determinants of health, including climate change, are properly addressed. It's a health system that must look at addressing health issues from a multi-sectoral approach. Okay, so take for example, climate change has driven issues of water sanitation and flooding in many coastal communities. Those of you here in Bayelsa, or some of you were in Anambra or Kogi State, you know testimonies of how flooding is a big issue. And when there's flood, especially in a place where the vector of Lassa is resident, what will happen is that they will eventually find themselves into human dwellings to look for food and all of that. So these are important things that we must bear in mind. Next slide. Okay. Yeah, so the main theme of our discussion today has been, it has been to look at breaking the chains of transmission of diseases. And it's important that for us to break the transmission of any diseases, we must understand six important variables. One is the infectious agent, which is the reason why I am asking, where are we with the Lassa fever vaccine production, which was one of the issues that was raised at the LIC. The second issue is of course the reservoir of infection, which has to do with man, which is a very important area. We have a lot of roles to play, and a lot of discussions have also been made by the previous speakers. And this also have a strong environmental determinants, looking at water, looking at food, and especially the relationship between the vector and the reservoir of infections. Another area which is very important is really around the mode of transmission, which in this case we know is by contact. How do we amplify IPC at the level of the facility and also in various households? So these are key things we must look at it from the lens of epidemiology and say, as a country, where is our focus moving forward? Which of these chains do we need to break? I'm going to take off through some of the examples of some of the things that that has been done, some of the lessons we have learned from it, and moving forward. Next slide. Okay, so policy. Where are the gaps? What are the gaps in policy? Where are the existing policies we have? One of the key game-changing policy that we have for Lassa fever in Nigeria, of course, is the One Health multi-sectoral plan, which was developed, and a new one is being updated. That work laid the foundation to what we are discussing today. So, and I think Nigeria has not really had a lot of setbacks when it comes to policy development. We've made incredible progress in policy development. But when it comes to policy implementation, that is where we have the gap, especially at the subnational level. The development of the National Action Plan on MRO 2.0 also reinforces the action on the One Health plan. And this will enable us to not just have a high for other diseases, but also look at Lassa fever. It's important for me to also mention that Nigeria has signed the COP26 commitment to building a climate resilient health system in 2021. And I'm privileged to be the one who facilitated this commitment for Nigeria. And also, we also have various environmental policies at state and national level and the operating guidelines. Next slide. Yeah, I think coincidentally, Professor Hannah has highlighted on this important slide, looking at the changing dynamics of the spread of Lassa fever from 2012 to 2019, when we have one of the highest number of cases and all of that. But one of the things that I want to emphasize is to look at our communities. If you go to most of our communities, especially even in the Lassa fever hotspots, you see that there are a lot of environmental degradation activities going on without the knowledge of the people. I'll give an example. I was privileged to go to on those states in Akure and Ilesha on issue of artisanal and small-scale gold mining. And I was shocked to discover that while Lassa fever and many other diseases are driving change, but there is a lot of migration activities happening within these areas between Nigeria and other countries. Okay, and there's a lot of deforestation taking place that are connected to mining, that are connected to agriculture, that are connected to lumbering. By the global standard, every country is supposed to have 8% of their forest reserve. But right now, Nigeria is eating over 25%. If you go to Cross River, if you go to Taraba, if you go to most of these areas where you can see those red signs, including Bayelsa, a lot of lumbering and deforestation is taking place without intentional policy and plans by the government to make sure that there is forest conservation and there is also conservation of wildlife. So these are triggers and areas for spillovers of emerging and re-emerging pathogens. Next slide. Okay, so understanding the climate dynamics, of course, those of you in climate change will understand that when we're talking about climate change and Lassa fever or climate change and any diseases, we're looking at four major variables. One is to look at the environmental risk, which in combination, we are looking at the variable population factors from geography. In this case, for geography, we are looking at those heavily forested locations where the vector is resident. We're also looking at related hazards, which previous speakers have emphasized, the importance of rainfall. Like, Nigeria is located in the equatorial region. These are regions that have high incidence of sunshine, has high exposure to sunshine all throughout the year. And over the years, studies have shown that countries within the equatorial region usually have high incidence of vector-borne diseases, from malaria, which are insect-borne, to also rodent-borne diseases. So there is that relationship. So as air pollution, as it increases, as rainfall also increases, it also makes it favorable for these vectors to multiply and grow. Okay. Then we also need to understand that also from the exposure of people who are struggling with many issues in the community, looking at our food systems, looking at our energy systems, looking at even the health workforce. And then all this translate into high level of impact in vector-borne diseases, in zoonosis, and also affecting the core building pillars of health system, including health facilities and infrastructure. So what are the key gaps? What are the key challenges in Lassa fever control? So looking from the communication angle, we have discovered that there is a poor integration of research findings into local action. Yes, if you look from 2018 to 2022, under the leadership of Dr. Chikwe as the DG of NCDC and other DGs who have taken over, NCDC has really published received many global visibility. But how does this research translate into local action? That is missing. So the approach should not be how many articles we are able to publish, but how many articles or how many action in those articles we are able to translate into communication that instigate change at the local level. That is where the action lies. We have also seen that there is increased intensive community awareness on Lassa fever as against community engagement. So what is community awareness? Yeah, much of what we do is that, okay, it's Lassa fever season, we are having outbreaks of diseases. NCDC will deploy RRT, Ministry of Environment, everybody will now rush and go, and then they spend some few days or weeks in those communities and then come back. So the people in the villages and the communities, they don't see it as their problem. They are not engaged. They don't see it as, because in engagement, they want to take the actions while we provide a supportive supervision. So that is lacking in communication. So we need to move our risk communication to the level where there is a community level ownership. And that is one of the key gaps we have. We have also seen there is also a low level of knowledge of the importance of environmental hygiene and food safety practices in most of the hotspot communities. Okay? Go to the communities who are supposed to be the custodian of food safety and environmental hygiene. At the community level, these are environmental health officers, wash officers at the local government level. And their number as quite depreciated over the years. So there is a big knowledge in gap, and there's also a depletion of health personnel. And that leads me to the second issue, which about is issue of policy and gaps for institutional policy. Between 2022 to this period, there is a drastic reduction in the health workforce in Nigeria of those who have been involved in these interventions. Some of the best case managers we have responding to Lassa fever, say, and most of these areas, most of them are no longer there. Some of them have japa and moved into other countries. Some of the nurses are no longer there because of the harsh condition in the country. There was a drastic reduction in health workforce in Nigeria. So that creates a very strong institutional gap that the government and the country need to look into. Most of the strong hands, most of the good hands who have been in NCDC left without smooth transition of molding other people and ensuring that it's smooth. Some people left with anger, and this create a lot of disparities in every system. When there is no smooth transition, you just wake up in the morning, for example, Dr. Hedwin is the one supporting you on Lassa fever in the environment, and the following day you call him, nobody smoothly, take that responsibility. This is a challenge. Importantly, I think that it is high time for Nigeria to set an agenda for elimination of Lassa fever. 59 years. 59 years. We should be targeting Lassa for elimination. We should be able to look at this point and say, okay, what are core endemic diseases that has been a global embarrassment to Nigeria? From now henceforth, what are measures to target to this? Because even when global community, WHO and different partners can set up global agenda, as a country, we need to reflect on our own agenda and adapt whatever global measure and say, this is where we are going. I think Lassa fever should be designated for elimination in Nigeria. We also seen there's also weak operations, policy issue, institutional issue. There's a weak operation of One Health approach at the subnational level. At the subnational level, at national level, yeah, One Health is working. But when you go to states, the Agriculture Ministry, they're only involved, they are only integrated into the EOC when the matter has become worse. In most of the states, environmental pillar is not working. So that pushed us to the level where most of the times we are reacting rather than being proactive. Okay, we need to ensure that there is inconsistent prevention and preparedness intervention at appropriate cycles. In response to Lassa fever, there are different cycles. There are two major cycles before the beginning of the outbreak, of major outbreaks, and also after the response to the outbreak. This is when environmental intervention is supposed to start. So environmental intervention is not supposed to start when we start having increasing number of cases. It must be targeted, and this is our recommendation in 2019. And this must be sustained over time. But we're having a gap in this area, in implementation of this approach. For research, there is lack of real-time integrated surveillance data, linking transmission to climatic dynamics. So what we have is there are pockets of research that were done, some of them by experts in Nigeria, some of them by experts outside Nigeria, talking about different climatic predictors and all of that. But this needs to be in surveillance system, where when you look at SOMAS or you look at HYNEX, you should be able to see in real time. This is the climatic changes, and this is how it's triggering. And that is where we need to go. Move into that surveillance system, and this will also guide research agenda. And we have also seen that the funding for local research is quite abysmal. It's quite infinitesimal. Some of the high-changing modeling and research that were done on Lassa fever were done by experts outside the country through funding, because we're not really funding our local institutions. How many universities in those hotspot communities and hotspot states are really involved in driving environmental research for Lassa fever? We've seen a lot of progress in 2019 and 2021, but right now we seem to go back to what it were before. We need to also have, thank God, there are some researchers in the house. We need to have an environmental research plan. The research plan is not just all about publishing articles. It's researching on the problems, operational problems that need to be addressed from the environmental point of view, for the purpose of any impact factors. Okay, and these should be institutionally led. So these are some of the key gaps. Next slide. Okay, there were some. I just want to share some of these examples. In 2019, we piloted, and I'm privileged to co-champion this intervention, a comprehensive One Health environmental intervention, where these include rodent control. But what is so game-changing about this intervention is that it was driven by the community. Okay, it involved recruitment of 200 community volunteers, 100 environmental health officers, over 240 30 women. We are engaged. We are trained to drive food safety measures, whereas the youth and the community volunteers were the one who were actually doing the rodent control under the supervision of the environmental officers. If you look at that picture, you see the two local government chairmen of Edo and Ondo. So they take the leadership at the political level. And this is the kind of action we need for us to make game changes. We don't want Lassa fever to be something that after only NCDC is on ground, if NCDC is not on ground, nothing works. So we need to level up our policy, our communication to the point where the community are the people driving the actions. And we need to sincerely support them over time. Next slide. So in one of these interventions, one of the drastic action we have seen was to see that if you look at the second picture on the left and the right up, that is one of the community called Idase. In 2019, if you look at epidemiological data, that's a recorded almost 0 case of Lassa fever in 2019 and 2020. And they used to be one of the top hotspot LGHs, hotspot communities in Ondo State. What were the game-changing actions? Because the community leaders were engaged. So they draw a community action plan. You could look at. So that is a plan drawn by the community, not by WHO, not by NCDC, not by Ministry of Environment, of what they are supposed to do. We brought in some of the elites, some of the lecturers from the community to support the action, and then we support them. Now, one of the triggers, we discovered that sport is one of the uniting factors in Nigeria. So in that time, we formed what we call the Lassa fever environmental what we call Lassa fever green forum, LFNAT forums in this community, where young people, we bring them to play football and use football as a strategy for youth engagement, to take action on monthly basis. And it was quite impactful, and we saw a game-changing action. We brought in clinicians, we brought in a Ministry of Information, NAO, and different partners work together. But this is not sustained. So we need a systematic and a sustained action from the environment side over time. And this action should not be reactive, it should be proactive. It should be in cycles. It should be led by the community. So it's not that all the times Ministry of Environment or NCDC have to run to the field. Let the local government chairman, let the local communities, let the state drive the action and have confidence. We saw that in Edo. After we did intervention, the Edo state government donated a lot of materials to drive the intervention at their own level. But what is lacking is sustainability. Next slide. So moving forward, I'm almost done. Next slide. Thank you. So we need to intensify community engagement and development of community action plans. We need to help communities to set zero-case agenda, community level. Zero-case agenda, we need to amplify environmental sanitation and hygiene through the local government chairman. So NCDC, Ministry of Environment, could engage with the Ministry of Chieftaincy Affairs and Community Development in each of those states and put up the Lassa issue on their table. We need to trigger. Women have very powerful forces to champion food safety, because when you're processing food and they spread gari on the road and all of that, these are actions that are taken by the women, and it's only the women who can solve the problem. We need to also address the issue, communication around healthcare waste management, because if all the samples that were collected and all those things that take out of the facility the waste ends up in the community without proper segregation and action, then we'll be creating cycles of problem. We need to enhance IPC awareness for neglected groups. This includes musicians and the rest. One area that I'm also seeing that is a good changing for us is for us to leverage on NGOs and journalists. They are very powerful people in the community to drive risk communication and engagement at the local level, while we support them. Next slide. Okay, for research, of course, we need to leverage on the integrated surveillance platform, linking Lassa fever dynamics to climatic data. We're happy that the Ministry of Health has leveled up climate health discussion, but we need to move beyond that into really bringing some key determinants into our surveillance system at real time. We need to foster data sharing within institutions of government and create a research plan agenda for the environmental sector. Next slide. Okay, policy, like I said, we need to have a clear national policy agenda for for elimination of Lassa fever, we have to take that bold vision. We have to take that bold vision. We have to take that bold vision, okay, and say, what is our agenda? We should be done at this level in the society. Nigeria should be done with some of these endemic diseases and neglected. I'm looking at some. There are more bigger problems for the world now. People are talking about ionizing radiation. People are talking about issues of lead coming from battery because the world is talking about migrating into. There are a lot of non-communicable diseases issues that are springing up. So the earlier we deal with a lot of small of these waterborne diseases and small of these sicknesses, the earlier for us to address more other issues that are emerging, due to trends in the health sector. So we need the policy changes. We need to deploy our intervention at critical cycles. It makes no sense to start to do prevention action when the outbreak has already occurred. It is not necessary. Those preparedness actions should be deployed at the close of the outbreak or beginning looking at the seasons, because we have known that rainfall is a key determinant. At this point in time, when we don't start, this is when people should be on the field and start comprehensive sustained interventions. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, next slide. Sorry, we lost.
Apologies. Looks like we've lost Vivian. Yeah, she's not on the call.
Okay.
Just one moment, please.
Okay, can I wrap up from my hand?
Okay, please go on. Yeah, please go on.
By your
Yeah.
turn to do.
Just go on, since you can do it from your end actually as well. I wanted to just quickly pull it up, but
Yeah, pull it up. If you can pull it up, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, while we're waiting for that, I can just be speaking to the issues as we go. So moving forward, I want to once again I want to emphasize that in WHO Nigeria, we are doing an incredible work across water sanitation, across climate change and health, chemical safety, and health in all policies. And we're working with different stakeholders, looking at coordination, evidence generation, development or review of guidelines, strategies, and plans, capacity building, advocacy and awareness creation, including technical guidance on priority intervention projects. Right now, we have started solarization of to move the community to that level. We need to start focusing on community engagement and sensitization and awareness and sharing of IC materials. We need to have a sustained investment in prevention activities before and after seasonal outbreaks in plant cycles. We need to see how we can integrate environmental surveillance only holistically into whole disease surveillance at the primary healthcare level, at the HGL level. Okay. People in the village may not be all on the social media. Okay, most people in the village, most of the women, most of the farmers who interact with this species usually are people who still listen to radio stations. I suggested, and before now, I will still want to reiterate that we need to open daily radio stations, hotspots in hotspot areas, providing real information and people calling. It's easier for somebody to report a suspected case in his community on radio where nobody is seeing him or her than for suspected case to show up in the community level. It's important for me also to emphasize that for Lassa fever, we have to look at our diagnosis and laboratory system. Can heredity tests for fever? Discussion has been made on this area because so that we'll not be missing some of the cases. This is very important that we need to look at it at this point. Even importantly, to integrate it even at the level of malaria control, because people always go up for malaria. When they go up, Lassa fever at the first place is almost the same thing like malaria. When you go, people have headache. Can we integrate Lassa screening at this entry point so that we'll not be missing cases that can amplify outbreak in many other communities? Next slide, and I'll be done. Okay, so moving forward, I also want to ask for your ideas. What do you think? These are some of my suggestions and my thought moving forward. We also want to hear from you and to learn more. And once again, thank you so much, and thank all our partners who are working with us to make sure that we push this agenda forward. My name is Dr. Edwin Isotu Ede, World Health Organization Nigeria. Thank you for the privilege.
Thank you so much, my global leader, for these insights. I'm even trying to digest a lot of these solutions that have been proffered, and I know this time will fail us, but I'm happy that these slides will be shared so that we can look at it again. The factor about multi-sectoral collaboration and integration has been preached over and over by our presenters, and also ownership, especially in risk communication on from our community and world levels, points that has been highlighted. A lot of things have been said today, and I'm sure people are already wrapping their thoughts around these presentations. Questions have been set already in our comments section. I think we need to address
before we go to the Q&A.
Our time elapses.
Sorry, before we go to the Q&A.
With your permission, Dr. Etunde, can we still continue with our questions?
Yes, so I just wanted to say before we go for the Q&A, let's have the post-test. Out from eHealth, Elijah and Co. Yes, so please let's have the post-test. Then after this, we'll go into the rest of the questions, the Q&A. I've tried to address them as much as possible. So colleagues on the call, please kindly take part in the... Yes, it's being projected, the post-test. So you have some questions that you can distribute to the speakers. I know some have already been answered. And sorry, just to clarify, I don't know if this question about to the first presenter, knowing that rats can also climb elevated surfaces, do you see advise the food stuffs Gary can be spread on elevated? So I think Collins answered this, right?
Yes, it has been addressed.
Okay. Okay, so once we have, I don't know, how many percent do we have now, please? For the poll. Please, our colleagues from eHealth. Hello, Elijah.
Yes, so we have about 45% completion so far.
Okay, once we have, let's see how far we can push this. Okay, so I think some people are saying they can't see the post-test. I don't know which type of device they are using. Well, I know I can see it from my own end. So there is no link, it's just going to pop up. And I believe it's mobile friendly as well. Okay, so how many percent do we have now?
So now we have 52%.
Okay. When we get to 60, I think we can take it down.
Okay.
So, okay, Elijah, sorry, just to clarify, because I'm seeing a lot of people saying they can't see the post-test.
Okay, this will just show up on your screen.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I see someone else saying that people can click on more and then click on polls for mobile devices. But I know that usually it just pops up even when I'm using my phone.
Yes, it's supposed to just do that.
Okay, so where are we now?
Oh, we are at 64%. So should we close it?
Let's push it to 70. Colleagues, please.
All right, 66 now.
Yeah, so once it's 70, just take it down.
All right.
Vivian, I think you can begin sharing the webinar evaluation form. And then Mr. Silas, is the poll over?
Yeah, we're at 69, 70. All right.
Great.
Take it down now.
So I think over to you now. Over to you, Mr. Silas.
Okay, thank you so much, I am. There's a question I saw, I want to ask. Somebody was asking about the zero case agenda. Dr. Edwin, can you throw more light on that, please?
Okay. All right. Thank you, and thank you for distinguished participants. Yeah, so over the years, it's been proven that it's easy to address a problem at the local level than at global level. Okay, so the zero case agenda, which we are proposing, is to say every community is to stimulate the community to rethink and say what is the real, how many cases of Lassa fever do we have this year, or how many people in this community died as a result of Lassa. Okay, so what can we do as a community to prevent Lassa in this community, so that by next year, one of our agenda is to make sure that we don't have even one single case of Lassa. So this issue has to be on the top agenda of the chiefs. All the communities, they have their council of chief and elders where they discuss their issue. And if we don't bring the issue of health into that level of agenda, then there is no that level of ownership. So the zero case agenda is a communication or risk communication approach where we put a zero case to say, allowing community to say that by so year, or from this so year, this is what we have, and this is what we want to do, so that we don't have a single case. And it's very possible in most of the communities. Okay, so we can target that. Is a proposal we are making. Okay, now this can be a very game-changing action if it's driven at the community level. Okay, so what we need to do as health officers is to stimulate this agenda, to stimulate this issue to be on top of the agenda of those key hotspot communities. And let me emphasize that most of the cases that we see, sometimes we share a PID curve, the epidemiology, the C-trep of Lassa fever. The communities are not even aware. So this will involve intentionality in making sure that some of the key opinion leaders in this community, when we are sharing our C-trep, they are also getting the reports, so that they can also understand their problem. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Edwin, for sharing more light on zero case agenda. Somebody was asking if, because waste management is actually an issue in most states, and said there's a concern for us to do more in this area than this discussion we are having now. Said, can you share the contact of sanitary desk officers via mail to all participants? Okay, somebody will address that and get back. I think the coordinator of the sanitary desk officers is on this call, and I'm sure she will take it up from here. So there's a question for Professor Godson Anna. They said, is there really a solution that can solve degradation, climate change? Said the more they try, the more it fails. But as environmental health officers, what can we really offer in the issue of climate change matters? Professor Anna, if you are there, can you?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. A very interesting question. We all have a role to play in the current climate scourge. And as environmental health officers, our responsibility is to assist in the aspects of climate change mitigation, as well as the adaptation activities. And so issues related to mitigation will be as much as possible to address those things that contribute to the emissions, especially from combustion processes, as well as the changes in the land land cover. So we should advocate for change in attitude and practices amongst the community members. We should be involved in driving community sensitization programs, just like my colleague, Dr. Edwin, has mentioned. We should also try to sensitize change agents to ensure that some of these activities are propagated by different both conventional and non-conventional media outfits. So apart from those mitigation activities, the adaptation strategies, for example, during the rainy season where there are floods, to what extent are we having neighborhood action teams, organizations, or efforts to reduce the stormwater through proper drainage channels? What activities are we doing to ensure that the drains are not blocked with waste? So a number of these activities will ensure that the various hideouts of the vectors are precluded or exterminated, as the case may be, and that will reduce the preponderance or proliferation of the Lassa fever vector. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. I will switch to another question asked by someone. This question is directed towards the first speaker, Sanitarian Collins. We know rats are in the center of transmission of Lassa fever. This person is asking for landfills, black spots, dump sites. How can they be managed consistently? Since we know that rats will always go there to fend for themselves. So what are we doing to actually manage our landfills and dump sites? Thank
you. Okay, thank you for the question. Management of a landfill or dump site, we believe that waste management should also start from our individual homes, where we can sort out this waste, especially the organic waste, the food materials, which we can also use for compost manure. And management of the dump site entails we can fence this dump site and also site it away from home. And in most of our cities, like especially in peri-urban and the rural area, what we see is temporary dump sites. And it's advised that this site is being sited far away from home so that we have a limited migration of these rats from these dump sites to our various homes. So if the local authority can assist the local community, there is need for them to fence this area to prevent rats from having access to these areas. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Sanitarian Collins, for providing an answer to this question. Please, some questions are similar, and so we will not ask all of them. They're already merged. In case I don't ask your question verbatim. All right, we'll take another question. This one is asking, how do we, since this is an integrated approach, how can we, our children as drivers, in having a good behavioral change, especially with this subject matter? We need to put children. Can I throw that to Dr. Soto?
Yeah, I think that is a very brilliant question. It makes me remember those days. We used to have a very effective school sanitation programs. Okay, and children can really be a very good instrument to influence behavioral change. Remember sometimes when you ask your children to do certain things and they will say, no, our auntie said we should not do this, we should do that, or try to correct us on certain hygiene practices. So I think it's an area that we need to explore, especially in those hotspot communities. To say, okay, how can we use children, for example, to trigger prompt evacuation or safe disposal of waste in the household, as well as hand washing. So I think it's a very good area and a question we need to explore. That we need to drive this into a school wash program, and then leverage on that to use the children as those who can trigger the actions in their houses. And I'm sure it will be very effective, because sometimes if you give responsibility to children, say every day remind your mommy or your daddy to make sure that they remove all the waste from the kitchen and it's tied up because it causes Lassa fever, I'm sure the child will not allow you to rest. So I think it's more of a contribution than a question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Edwin. So everybody is to be carried along, regardless age or status, from school to back to the village or to the communities we belong. We'll all be champions so that we mitigate Lassa fever in our communities. I'm seeing another question I need to ask, and the first speaker, this one is to you. Is that apart from using an elevated surface and knowing that rodents can still climb to an elevated surface, he said, what other affordable alternative method would be recommended for drying of food items? So this person is asking of innovation. Have we thought outside the box on method of drying food items? Santeria Collins, please.
Yeah. Thank you for that brilliant. Call just entered. Oh, call it. Can you hear me? Can you still hear me?
Okay, I think I'm hearing you faintly. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So for us, for now, if you cannot use an elevated surface, but it's expected that those elevated surface will support it with a slippery post or smooth post. Rats cannot climb this post because they are slippery, so the claws cannot grip this post. But if you cannot use this, alternative we have is you can use an indoor drying, a very clean and a well-ventilated room that is not infected with these rodents. So I think I've answered your question. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much, Santeria Collins. I think we are already moving out of our time, but I think I can take one more question. Dr. Yetunde, can I still take one more?
Okay, yes. Let's just take one more, brief and straight to the point so that we can get on with other things. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So this question is actually directed to the Federal Ministry of Environment. What communication strategy has the Federal Ministry found most effective in raising awareness about Lassa fever prevention? Over the years, we'll be having field activities, we've done risk communication, done advocacies, and also several activities to prevent Lassa fever from spreading. Which communication strategy has been the best? Santeria Collins, I still direct this question to you, please.
Okay. Thank you so much for the question. From our experience, from our various field intervention, the strategy we have found that is more effective is town hall meetings. When we hold these meetings, the community members, the gatekeepers, we engage them and they ask questions that concerns them about their sanitation status, what is happening in the environment, and we're able to profile solutions to most of their concerns. So, and also during a community cleanup exercise, we also find that to be effective, and also collaboration with multi-sectorial stakeholders. Thank you, and over.
Thank you so much. In fact, multi-sectorial collaboration with other relevant ministries and department agencies and partners cannot be overemphasized. You can say that over and over because integrated approach is what we have been preaching to be able to mitigate Lassa fever in the country. And so nobody will succeed working in silos. In fact, I saw somebody in the comment section who said we should think globally and act locally. It's a strong point for us to also take from all we've been saying so far. No ministry will succeed working alone, and no department or agency will succeed working alone, but integrating this. Having said this, I will like to hand over to Dr. Yetunde, our Lassa fever IM, who have really done well. I think you can take it over from me.
All right, thank you so much, Silas. You've really done a very beautiful job. And there's really nothing much to say. Thank you, colleagues. I think we've come to the end of our webinar for today. Just to also add, I know most times the 2018 outbreak has been the one that has been very laudable, and also quite a number of efforts, like even leading up to the first Lassa Fever International Conference that was held. But for 2024 cumulatively, we recorded over 10,000 suspected cases, and we also had 1,309 confirmed cases. So you see that it's quite larger than what we have ever recorded. And even that of the previous year also recorded a higher number. But I know the 2018 one is the one that's very laudable. So we've been having a year in, year on, increase, and it shows that there is need to really put a One Health approach, right, to control this disease. There's need to tackle it from every angle. Apart from the development of vaccines, there are so many other interventions. You still have to deal with case management, environmental sanitation and hygiene, risk communication and community engagement, and so many other things that we really, really need to do. The goal is to, of course, have no one die from Lassa fever. But then as a nation, we also have a strategic plan which will soon be launched, hopefully, perhaps maybe next month, right? A 5-year strategic plan for Lassa fever. And our goal for that is to have a less than 10% case fatality rate. Yes, we want nobody to even be infected from Lassa fever, but then we also need to look at the context of things and so many other factors that are involved. And hopefully, we'll be able to achieve our goals soon and even set a new target where we have nobody dying or being infected from Lassa fever. Hopefully, that goal will be in the nearest future and not too far. Quite a lot of efforts are around the vaccine development. But then we are also very happy to have had this webinar when it comes to the environmental interventions. You can see we are doing quite a lot. And I'm sure even if they go back and sit back, there are many more interventions which have not been highlighted. These are just the tip of the iceberg of the many, many things that have been done in the field and also the things that we plan. At this point, we also know we have partners on the call. Please, we also need partner support to support the environmental sanitation and hygiene activities for, of course, we say Lassa fever, this is a Lassa fever webinar, but we know that once this is done for Lassa fever, it also cuts across many other diseases, right, that are not just related to Lassa fever. Together, we can continue to push together to ensure that we reach the national targets of a less than 10% case fatality rate, and even set a new target for ourselves as a country. It's a great pleasure to have worked with the Ministry of Environment on this webinar. I want to really appreciate the Deputy Director, Mrs. Rita Okia, under her leadership, and the other team members as well. Really grateful. Collins, I mean, I've been chasing you on this since like, I know it's probably almost 3 months now, but I'm happy that all of us are happy and the output is very glaring. This was a very huge, successful webinar. And I'm very sure we'll have many, many fruitful collaborations. Thanks to our professor, Professor Gotsi Anna from UI, thanks to Dr. Edwin from WHO. And we also appreciate our very own as well in the TWG. Collins, really proud of you. Thank you for the question in the poll. So I can't really mention everybody, but all of you working behind the scenes, our colleague from eHealth Africa, thank you so much. To my team in the NCDC as well, thank you so much. Today's webinar took a lot. I can't fail to also mention colleagues from Breakthrough Action Nigeria, who have also been behind the scenes, and many other partners. Apologies if I forget to call your name, but your contributions, your calls have really, really been supporting to make sure that we have a hugely successful webinar. This is the very first one for the year, and we're looking forward to many, many more that we're going to have. Of course, we'll be ending this series very soon. We'll have one more webinar, and then we'll end the webinar with the 7 parts. Hopefully in 2 weeks' time or early February, we don't know yet, but we plan towards that, communicate with you, and we hope to see more of you on that call as well. And perhaps we'll also have a series of webinars where we maybe launch a strategic plan or any other activity. We'll also keep you abreast as our community members. Thank you so much, colleagues. Outbreaks occur and end in communities. Together, we need to put all hands on deck to be able to solve this issue of Lassa fever and many other public health